Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Somerford's Technology Podcast. We're having a series of conversations with experts in technologies that will solve your problems. And we dive into them with practical examples and look ahead at future trends too. I'm Anne, I'm the Technical Director of Somerford Associates. And today I'm honoured to talk to Paul Winchester. Hi, Paul.
Hi there, thank you for having me. The honour is all mine.
And we're going to talk about ITSI, which is IT Service Intelligence by Splunk. I thought that we'd just go through who you are, what is ITSI, just in case people don't know what it is and what it does for them, our glass table methodology, Somerford's, and where to go to help, and what's next in the future in the sort of area of observability. Well, let's start with you then. Paul, who are you? Why are you here?
I wonder the same thing myself. Well, so I have been working in IT for a long time now, around 25 years. John Major was just about still Prime Minister when I started. That does date me a bit. We hadn't won the Ashes for 10 years, I think, at that stage, and had another 10 years to wait till we did. So, so I started out as a software developer, primarily developing. And the part of that job that I sort of found I particularly thrived in was the sort of system analytics, sort of understanding clients' issues and challenges. And over the years, I kind of continued in the same area, but really focused on the whole end-to-end process. And that's really been my approach from the start. And so around just over 3 years ago, I switched from that area and came to work for Somerford. Trained up as a Splunk consultant, and very quickly realised that the IT ops area, which I'd been involved in to a greater or less extent for the previous 20 odd years, really provided me with the kind of best environment to take that type of approach further. And again, looking at solutions, reduce the load. Really, I mean, IT ops is getting more and more complex. IT systems are becoming more and more critical. And it's difficult to keep on top of it all. So that's really what we try and address with ITSI.
Right. So it's sort of Splunk's solution to IT ops, the challenge of being able to look at all your systems in one single place.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So we know that Splunk is a fantastic data platform, and essentially what you can do with it from there is go beyond kind of basic dashboarding and take it into a slightly different area where we're looking at things in a service-oriented manner. So, there are lots of definitions of service, but I kind of tend to think of it as, in its simplest way, as just a group of tools that work together to achieve a particular goal for the business. And those can be quite small services, and they can then roll up and build up into larger and larger services, and we move from the IT area into the business space as well. And that's really where it starts having a more higher impact on the business as a whole. That's really the part that interests me is how do we take these disparate IT systems and really represent how they impact the business so that you've really got an understanding of where your potential weaknesses are. You can keep on top of issues as they arise more quickly and accurately, and also look to see where efficiencies could be made and things like that. So
So I often find that like clients in Splunk, especially because it's all about data, people miss that data doesn't have to just be in the IT space. It often is, because IT people get it really quickly, but just because they live with data all the time.
Yeah.
But when it's across the business services as well, you get just as much value from observability than you would in an IT place. And it's not just about your servers being down or your online shop being down. It's about your efficiency within the business processes as well.
Absolutely, that's a really good way of putting it. So although it's all based on data, and all that data ultimately comes from IT systems, the actual IT systems themselves aren't necessarily the primary indicator of what's going on within your service. And the quality of the data you've got and the type of data you've got can tell you far more than just, is my server running properly? So we often start with that kind of basic infrastructure monitoring piece, and a lot of companies will have infrastructure monitoring very well pinned down. They'll know what's going on with their servers. But what they probably don't understand as well on the whole is, how does an impact on those servers actually have a real impact on my business? What is the
so
health?
what?
Yeah, exactly. So, and what we talk about in ITSI is service health. So once we define a service, we know what data we need to collect in order to represent that service, and we use KPIs, key performance indicators, to do that.
Mm.
We roll those KPI values into a service health score. And that's really one of the sort of key points about ITSI, is we look at service health as a whole. It's balanced across the different KPIs so that those can be weighted differently, so that some things can have more of an impact. So as an example, if you've got your retail website as your service that you're interested in, that you're looking at, if a server goes down or the CPU is very high, from a user's perspective, the person using that website may have no impact at all. In fact, if you've built robust systems, it probably won't. But if the latency of their connection to your website, or the latency within your website, suddenly starts to go up, maybe you've got a network issue or something, they're going to notice that. That's going to impact their experience and may impact sales. So you would say, well, yeah, exactly. So latency might be a more important key performance indicator than, say, CPU or memory usage.
And you weight that higher.
So
like the CEO looking doesn't have to see just a sea of red KPIs. He can have that, or she.
It gives context.
So what?
Yeah, exactly. It gives context. So the services give context to all this data. So the data itself can be, useful, less useful. It doesn't matter. What you do is you build the intelligence, the service intelligence, into ITSI. And then that allows you to represent those services in a truly meaningful way that actually does reflect what's going on. And that gets refined over time as well.
Yeah.
So don't just build it, step away and leave it. You refine it and improve it over time so it becomes a better and better representation.
But you do that, or does machine learning do that? Or?
Well, a bit of both. So machine learning, as we all know, hopefully, doesn't do magic on its own. And it always requires, firstly, high-quality data, and secondly, somebody to set it up to behave or to learn in the way that it needs to in order to actually deliver the results we want it to. And what machine learning can give us in ITSI, there are several components within ITSI that use it. One of the most potent is predictive analytics. So once we've got a good body of data, we've got consistent behavior, what predictive analytics will give us is a way to take previous incidents, should we say, deviations from normal behavior, and start to identify the precursors to that, such that when those precursors are identified in the data again, before a failure, before an incident happens, then the predictive analytics will flag that and say, there is something here you should possibly be looking at based on our experience. So that's the kind of most sophisticated tool built into it, and that can be very, very powerful because you can actually avoid incidents from happening.
Okay, so all of that, deriving the KPIs from the business and defining the services, it's obvious to me, and probably to you too and the listeners, that doesn't sound like an IT technician sort of engineer skill set. That's more of a consulting skill set, and that sounds quite rare in a. Is that the case? Are there many qualified consultants in EMEA?
No, there aren't. That's an interesting point, because the actual building of the ITSI components has some simpler parts, some more complex parts, but the setup, the analytical piece that comes before that, there aren't that many people who specialize in that in the EMEA region. It's more commonplace in North America, but I'm, I believe, one of the only certified ITSI analysts in the UK, and probably in EMEA as well. The courses that I've done, thinking about it, it's mostly UK-based people, but then we had them across Europe. So I think it's certainly quite a unique offering that Somerford has to have that part of the process well covered by myself, I like to think. And we also have implementation certification within Somerford as well. Myself and a couple of my colleagues are certified ITSI implementers as well. So we've got the full cycle covered in that sense.
But it's not. What I understand is that our methodology is kind of more about knowledge transfer. So you do like a little pilot. We're going on to the glass table methodology. you do like a little pilot, and then the business who ITSI is new to will do it with you, and then begin to get those skills themselves, so that they can, carry on and fly with it in future.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the key thing. I think one of the when you're sort of presented with a complex tool like ITSI, one of the quite reasonable questions is going to be, okay, well, it's all very well setting this up, but how are we going to manage it? How are we going to maintain it? How are we going to continue to build value over time rather than just set it up once and leave it? So what we try and do is so that the ITSI glass table methodology that we've developed at Somerford really takes Splunk's approach and then adds a bit more to it that we think works with our customers better and with our general approach better. So we focus on a few key services to start off with, usually just one, maybe two services to start off with. And we go through the process of identifying the services we're going to focus on, have tools for helping narrow down the list of possible candidates to the one or two we're going to focus on. We then go through a service decomposition exercise, which is quite a lengthy process to go through to discuss really in some detail how that service works. It's quite a high-level conversation, but we do need to get down to the detail as well. So we have various different people required on that session.
It's a hard mixture of skill sets, isn't it?
Yeah, that's quite a full-on one. And then the idea is that by going through this, though, we're not just wanting to get the information, summarize it, pass it on to the implementer and go. The idea is that our clients work with us in this area, particularly with the service decomposition exercise, to understand how it works so that they can then look in the future to start running these themselves, understanding the process of taking a discussion about the service and then a discussion about how to operationally use the tools within ITSI. And there are lots of different tools that have different areas that they address most effectively, depending on what your requirements are. And we can talk about those a bit. And so taking that process and then building the elements within ITSI that you need in order to represent that. So the idea that we have is that over time, we do the first couple of services. You say it's a bit of a pilot, but we're talking about a production solution as well. It's not really a proof of concept.
I see. It's not a proof of concept place.
Yeah, but it is a pilot. Pilot's good work for it. It's like,
okay,
let's get out first. Let's get people familiar with this. And also, let's get different parts of the business, different business units, excited about the possibilities, because if one unit has this shiny new tool and it's really doing good things for them, others will want to see what that's about. Then we start building, and really we would try and sort of each step, we'd do 2 or 3 more, and each step we would step back a little bit more, and after 2 or 3, 4 iterations, we usually find that most scenarios can be well covered in-house. Then what we would look to do is return on a regular basis to make sure that everything's still running smoothly, and maybe to look at some of the stickier issues that come up. So it's a very collaborative process.
Yeah.
Quite intense. It's not, it's not an easy thing to do by any means, but it is definitely worth it. Done well, it is hugely impactful and can really make a difference.
Well, let's can we take a showcase example? I mean, you don't have to mention names of the clients, but I think it might help someone listening really visualize what one can do. Yeah.
So let's think. So let's take a retail example I worked on recently. And this really shows that in a kind of classic IT sense, you're looking at servers and performance and things like that. And if you were in, say, a bank, it would all be about those elements. But in the retail space, you've got lots of different services that you could be looking at. In this particular case, we were looking at warehouses. So if you were thinking about this in a in a service context, each warehouse would be a service, a business service. There's no real distinction, but we just sort of use the terminology to help to see the different levels. And then the supply chain would be the whole service that would be part of. All of the warehouses would form part of the supply chain. And then the supply chain itself would be part of an even bigger service that, at the very high
providing the product.
Yeah, exactly. So within the business, the supply chain would be one major part of that. So you can kind of see how the different service levels build already. And then at the warehouse level itself, we have various tools. So we've got things that are fairly standard, like let's say printers. We have servers in there, but they also have specialist software. And that specialist software goes wrong occasionally. So we were asked to come in to say, right, can we get it to the point? Because what was happening was the people in the warehouse, something would go wrong with the software. They'd wait for 10 or 15 minutes to see if it would sort itself out. If it didn't, they'd get on the phone. They'd say, we've got a problem with our software. And somebody would start trying to fix it. Usually the fixes were quite well understood, but there was a delay there, and obviously quite a lot of lost productivity in that time where a large number of people can't do anything because that software is not working. So what we were trying to do is look at the log information coming from that application to identify when there is a problem so that it can be fixed before anyone phones up. So when they're doing their 10 or 15 minutes sitting around waiting for it to work, oh, look, it is working again. We didn't have to tell anyone, and off we go. So within that warehouse, there were a couple of tools like that, some more standard bits and pieces.
So that's very IT, like health of IT equipment still.
Yeah, that's right. And then in terms of the other part of this was the orders flowing in and out, and reconciling them with each other. The numbers of orders coming in, you could look at the rate at which they were getting managed. You could start seeing that maybe there was a bit of a bottleneck. If the numbers started to ramp up, the number coming in was outstripping the number going out, that sort of thing. So we could use that data in lots of different ways. And that's really one of the great powers of Splunk, is once you've got your data in, it's really down to you then what you can do with it. And it's the same data or same sets of data can be used in multiple different ways.
That's why it's fabulous. You don't have to choose what you want to do with that data at the beginning. It just goes in.
Yeah.
Sure, you pay for ingestion, don't you? But there we are. And then you can reuse it however you want, as many times as you want.
Exactly. And you can add more metadata to that. You're still only ingesting it once. But let's say you know that a particular code within your application logs means a particular thing in plain English. Okay. So you can add that data. You can add that data after it's been ingested, just to say, when you see this error code, it means this. And then when we show that, maybe on a glass table, we can say, list out, right, this is how many of this error in plain English we have had, and the number underneath. So it's it's a very flexible tool, and really this is where the analytic part of the job, which is my role, is really crucial to help guide through, because there's so many possibilities.
I mean, you could get a bit bamboozled by it all, can't you?
Yeah. So that's where I really help guide through the complications. Hopefully,
so
on that quickly.
In this warehouse one, how did you operationalize it in the end? Did it go into their daily meetings? What did you do? How did it get there?
Yeah, so the I won't even try and say that. That part of the story, if you like, is also key, and what we try and get very early on. So, what are you actually going to do with this information? Because often it's quite different to the way support departments, for example, will approach their IT. So, it is a key part of the discussion, and so within ITSI, we have tools such as glass tables that give you a fantastic broad overview, that observability that we talked about. That's in the glass table. Then you've got things like deep dives. Deep dives show things in a time series, so you can look at root cause really quickly and clearly. And these things are easy to set up. This is the thing. It's not a technical job. It's all done in a GUI. It's really quite accessible. And that's really where the knowledge transfer comes in. But then when we get a bit more sophisticated, we talk about episodes. So what Splunk ITSI will do is it'll group things together, events together, and say these all look like they're related to one another, and it'll create an episode. And from there, you can drive alerting, integrations into ticket systems like BMC Remedy or ServiceNow. Those integrations are built into ITSI. And so in terms of that operational model, it's there are a number of different ways that you can use it. You can use the alerting. You can have eyes on screens. For things like predictive analytics, for example, you want that alert to come through so that you can provide suitable action, suitable remedy before anything actually goes wrong. So, lots of different ways that you can use it, and that's an important part of that early conversation to understand where we need to get to.
Yeah. So if you were like the COO, you could get an email as often as you like from ITSI if you want, or you could use it to have your meetings with the warehousing managers and stuff like that in the area underneath you.
Yeah, that's right. So you can use it. So we usually think of it in terms of kind of real-time observability, or semi-real, near real-time observability. But it's also a useful tool for showing trends. So you don't have to look at things in the last half an hour. You can look at things over the last month if you want to show how things varied over time. And it's very much a tool that can be tuned to the audience. So that COO, they may want to get an email, but they might want to get a text message instead. We have integrations with other Splunk tools such as VictorOps. VictorOps is great for managing alerting. So if you want to set up, say, a pattern of escalation, so the COO only gets told if a certain level of escalation is required, then we can do an integration with VictorOps. Potentially, I'm going to use one of those forward-looking statements. It is in version 4.5 of ITSI, which is the very latest version, currently only available on cloud, but maybe by the time you listen to this, it'll be more generally available as well.
Yeah.
But that VictorOps integration is in there. So, and ITSI does lend itself to being pulled in or working with other tools within Splunk's sort of suite of tools that they have. VictorOps being one. We can do some work with SignalFX as well. And
what do they do?
Phantom. So SignalFX gives the real-time monitoring of cloud technologies. And that's something that it's a very new acquisition for Splunk, so the integration isn't fully there yet, but we anticipate that being something to come in the next 12 months or so. Phantom allows you to set up playbooks to respond to particular conditions. So, for example, if you knew how to resolve a particular issue and you knew the conditions that led up to it, you could set up a link to Phantom to drive a particular a sequence of events to be executed to resolve that issue. So these are all the kind of more advanced ways of pulling ITSI together, but it is showing how it isn't. There is a long way you can go with this. It's a starting point, but there's real power in this over time to build and expand into a really complete solution.
Yeah. And so in terms of starting points, when do you think someone's ready to do ITSI, and where would they go to get help first?
Well, that's a really key question, and I'm very glad you asked that because it's something I have some views on.
Go on.
I would say that you should have a good experience of Splunk to start with ITSI, and by that I mean you should be familiar with how to get data into Splunk, how to build dashboards, and really get that initial use out of your data that you've already got. And then what ITSI allows you to do is build on that. And what we usually find is that the customers who have the most success with ITSI are beginning to find the limits of what they can do in Splunk that ITSI will then allow them to expand into and go beyond. Now, it's not essential. I've been to greenfield sites where we've installed ITSI at the very start, and that works well too. It's a different process, though, because you have to learn the Splunk elements as part of that if you've not used Splunk before. So my ideal scenario would be somebody who's maybe used a company that's maybe used Splunk for a year or so. They've got a couple of people in-house who know it pretty well, and good communications internally to allow us to build up and do that knowledge transfer. That's such an important part for us to make sure that our customers know how to use these tools and are not totally reliant on us to. We'd obviously always want to be there to help, but really you get the most value if you can build these tools yourself up to a point.
Well, we do have free support when people buy it through us, but we, it's better to have that as an escalation point, isn't it? Really, what sort of skill set should people, think to have here? Do they need to be power users of Splunk or?
Yeah, that's a good starting point. You would ideally want somebody who has the kind of admin knowledge, even if you're a Splunk Cloud user where you're not having to administer the site, the environment directly. You still need to administer the data onboarding and the flow of data and all the rest of it. So somebody with some admin knowledge and skills is really beneficial. A couple of power users who really know how to get Splunk search working well for them, and as I say, know the visualizations and dashboards pretty well. That would really give us a head start when we start moving into areas like ITSI.
Yeah, and then there's the business users as well. So they don't need to be power users and writing SPL or anything. But do you have any introduction webinars or anything to show them, this is the potential and what you can ask from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So at Somerford, I've been running a series of webinars, pitching at different levels. More technical ones, we do a technical workshop. That's like a full-on 3-hour session for your kind of power user and admins. But we also do a half-hour. Let's introduce you to the concepts of ITSI. And one of the key things I go through there, which I really recommend, is to say it's just half an hour, is showing how for 3 different users ITSI works for them. Whether that's at senior management level, whether that's at a kind of IT operational management level, and then the actual analyst who's on the front line trying to fix the problem. Showing how ITSI can work for all 3 of those different individuals.
Well, that sounds cool.
Yeah.
Shall I put the link to that in the description?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
So was it a webinar, a half an hour webinar?
Half-hour webinar, yeah. We run them fairly regularly, but we've got one recorded, so that's definitely worth checking out. That's on the website.
And we sort of touched on what's next in this space, the observability space.
Yeah.
Is it just integrations with SignalFX, VictorOps, Phantom, and machine learning, or is there even more?
I think those are the key elements. So what that's giving you is it's giving you that complete picture. So you've got your SignalFX gives you that absolute up to the moment knowledge of what's going on in your cloud space. ITSI combined with Splunk App for Infrastructure, we haven't mentioned that, but that's a free tool that gives your infrastructure monitoring in a really digestible and sort of easy to roll out way, and that integrates directly into ITSI. So there's more to talk about there. But Splunk App for Infrastructure is a key part of ITSI.
Yeah.
So that gives you your infrastructure monitoring. So you've got cloud covered there, you've got your infrastructure covered there. Then you add the service intelligence on top with ITSI. And from there, it's like, what do you want to do with it? What is your operational model? Do you want to run a playbook? That's Phantom. Do you want to send an alert? Then you could go into VictorOps. So ITSI will do basic elements of that. You can run scripts, for example, from ITSI. You can send alerts and emails and the like, and create tickets in ticket systems like ServiceNow. You can do all that directly from ITSI, but if you want to take that to the next level, then there is the VictorOps and Phantom as well. And who knows, the machine learning, it's got, we have predictive analytics, we've got adaptive thresholds where over time the thresholds that you set for triggering alerts adapts according to changing conditions.
Sorry, the improvement engineer in me, sort of the evil ways you could use that. You could force the company to improve via making the thresholds increasingly difficult. But anyway.
Yeah,
sorry,
no, that's true. That's true. There's lots of ways of misusing these tools as well.
That's that.
Then you've got so there are 3 or 4 different machine learning components already built in, and those I'm sure will continue to expand because the product is being heavily worked on at the moment. I have to say, having been working with ITSI for the best part of 2.5 years, the amount that's being added, particularly in the last 18 months and really in the last 12 months, is very impressive. The tool's become much more refined. It's expanded into different areas, and I think that will continue. It's certainly something that I see a lot of focus from Splunk themselves.
Yeah,
talking about ITSI a lot at the moment. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about in terms of just increasing the I'd say the machine learning components and other aspects of ITSI in the future. I think it's going to be a very productive area.
Yeah, it's a good time to hop on the bandwagon for ITSI though as well, isn't it? Because it has had that maturity time. It's really slick now. It's really working well. We've got slick ways to roll it out and how best to run a project on it.
That's right.
It's quite a good time to get onto it.
I think so. I mean, the reason why we developed our glass table methodology is that we felt confident that the experiences we'd had with various customers over the years had really given us some useful and potent insights into how to make this work effectively. Because it's repeatable. It's repeatable. Yeah, exactly. It's about helping the customer understand what is needed to make it work, because it isn't really just a plug and play tool. You do need to have some understanding around it. And I guess if there are pitfalls, that's one of them, is that there's an assumption that, you just build a service and it all just works. You can, but you'll get a lot more from it with a more detailed approach to it. So, but I think there's a lot of potential. And I think what's happening is that there's areas like infrastructure monitoring are really well covered now. People have got that down, and whether they're doing it in Splunk or in other part of software, it doesn't matter. That these things are very well understood. And I think what's happening now is people are realizing that that's good up to a point, and it tells you a certain amount up to a point, but there's a lot more that you can get from the same data. That's really where Splunk and ITSI come in.
Absolutely. So our glass table methodology is also on our website, probably?
That's right. And it does get mentioned in the webinar as well. So I think we have details of that. There's certainly I believe there's a blog post about it that I wrote, and also a kind of one-pager just to kind of get a summary of what it's about. So yeah, if you've got any questions about that, let us know. We've got plenty of information to help, and I'm always available to chat it through, talk it through as well.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the time you spent today. It comes to life more when you talk about that, like that example of the warehousing, and I could really imagine that ITSI, working in an actual company.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is one of the challenges. Sometimes it's a little difficult to see, well, how would this work for me? How does this relate to my business? I think if businesses already have a very service-oriented way of looking at their operations, then perhaps it might be a bit more obvious. But a lot of companies don't really operate that way, and so we kind of create these structures, and then it starts to come together. And I think if you do look at the webinar, some of the slides there show those structures much more visually, and I think it's much clearer when you see it like that.
Thanks so much for your time then, Paul.
No problem, my pleasure.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. That was ITSI.